So we presented this last week. It took about an hour to get through. I imagine it's going to take about the same amount of time this week, so figure we'll be done in an hour. And for those that don't know me, I've been working with RKL for 10 years or so now, and about 10 of those years have been on working with Sage X3, a little bit of 500, and then the 10 years before that was mainly 500. And the 10 years before that was tax returns and reviews and compilations and maybe a little audit. But that wasn't with RKL. So if you want to join by phone, here's the phone information. And that's also part of the Zoom meeting too. So if your computer's not working well, you can join by phone. And this is the agenda for today. We're going to go through a checklist to make sure that all these tasks are done before you can close out the year. Otherwise, X3 is going to give you errors in some of the reports or some of the processes that should tell you you need to do these steps before you can actually close out the year. We'll review some of the reports that you should be running in X3 so that you can tie the balances out in the general ledger to the subledger reports. We'll take a look at those reports. We'll go through the closing process, the actual function. We'll go through that, close the fiscal period and year. Generally, everything we're going to do today except close out the year applies to every month, every reporting month of your fiscal calendar. So it's not just year end. We'll go through some of the financial reporting, other considerations, and then we'll look at the 1099 generation and printing of 1099s. And then we'll update a couple default parameters that are in the system so that when you run reports, the dates will default correctly and you won't have to enter them every time. And then we'll have a Q&A session, but you can ask questions along the way through the chat. All right, so you'll notice today in the slide presentations, I'm not listing out the breadcrumbs for all the functions we're going to go through because it would just take up too much space. But what I do list out is the function itself. And if you don't know where the function is, you can use the Escape F7 screen if you're on any screen except a landing page really in X3, you can use the Escape F7 function. So if we just go into, so if we're in reports, and then you hit Escape F7, it brings up the execution of one function, and then you can use this function to jump to another function. Let me just grab one. So if we want to see where inventory counts are located, this is our function, GES-SNL. We put that into our direct call here, paste, tab, and then we hit the button right here. And then you can see it's going to bring us into this function. So here we are. So this will have the breadcrumbs for you. So you can use that function if you don't know where one of these functions are or is. So this is your stock count. Slideshow. So also on the screen too, you can see it shows you your last 15 functions that you've accessed. So it's an easy way to go back to something, a screen that you were on. You can do a search here. If you type in, say, journal and then hit the search button here, it'll show you the breadcrumbs for any breadcrumb that contains a journal entry or journal in the title. And then you can, if you're on a function, you can say add to favorites here and create a favorites list in here. You can also do that outside of this function. So that's just really just so that you can access the functions that we're going to use today. So we're going to go through the year-end closing checklist first. And These are some of the examples that you need to complete in X3 before you process the year end or month end, really the month end here at this point. So these are operational costing type transactions that need to be done. Your physical counts that they're performing out on the floor, if you're doing that at year end, you need to validate all those count sheets so that the system can adjust the counts and create the entries to adjust the general ledger also. All work orders or all closed work orders have to be costed. So this is the function you run to cost the work orders. Any subcontracting orders that have been received should also be costed and closed out. The stock accounting interface must be completed with no errors. So if you're running the stock accounting interface as a recurring task in X3, you'll want to run that manually and confirm there are no errors in there, because you don't always get an error message. You know, I don't think anybody's actually getting any kind of alerts that are alerting you to errors in the stock accounting interface. So you need to actually run it manually and confirm that there's no errors. Same thing with the WIP accounting errors, WIP accounting interface. You'll need to run that manually, make sure there's no errors. And that's usually used to post subcontracting entries and work order entries. The stock accounting interface is going to post all the other inventory transactions. But we do have some customers using the stock accounting interface to do everything. So your posting of AP, AR, and treasury type transactions, you'll want to make sure that all your customer shipments have been invoiced, and there's probably about 3 different ways that you can do that in the system or actually invoice them. All sales invoices and credit memos have been posted, so both your sales invoices and your customer invoices have to be posted. There's 2 functions there. The first one is to post all the sales invoices that aren't posted. The second one is for the customer invoices that haven't posted. Kind of the same idea with purchase invoices and VP supplier invoices. You'll want to run these 2 processes. And you want to make sure that all your payments for cash received, plus checks or ACH wires, that type of thing, you want to make sure that all those transactions have been posted in the system. Going through the financial accounting process, so these are functions that you might run in X3 before year end or month end. You'll want to make sure that you enter all the accrual entries and generate their reversal. It will show up in your closing process error log if you haven't generated the reversal of an accrued entry. So if you check the box to reverse it and you haven't reversed it, just make sure you generate it or change the box to no, that you don't want to reverse it. If you're using recurring entries for depreciation or other types of transactions, you'll want to generate those. There's no error on that, but you'll want to make sure that you do that. Invoices to receive. So when you're receiving non-inventory products in X3, there's no journal entry created for those transactions during the receiving process. So you'll want to run the invoices to receive process, and that'll actually generate an accrual that will reverse whenever you put in the reversing date, usually the first day of the next month. You'll want to match your R&I account, and you can either do that manually, one at a time, or you can run the automatic process, which is the second function here, the automatic process. You can actually access the automatic process from the manual process. And usually we usually set that up so that matches based upon the purchase order and line number of the purchase order, so that all the receipts and all the invoices match using the purchase order and line number field, which I think is in the free reference field. So if you're not using automatic matching, we can help you set that up. Generate multi-currency revaluation and translation entries. So that's to revalue your open invoices, both AP and AR at month end. And then translation process, usually if clients are running two different ledgers, then you can translate the balances in the second ledger so that the translation gains and losses at month end are generated and posted to the other comprehensive income account. You can enter your depreciation manually if you're not using the fixed assets module, and we'll talk about fixed assets in a moment. Delete any existing or change simulated journal entry status to actual. Most clients don't use the simulated journal entries, but we do use them. Sometimes clients use them to project depreciation for the year and post the simulated entries, and then when they're ready to generate actual entries, they can remove the simulated entry and create the actual entry. They're also used too in translation on the second ledger. So usually it's those two reasons why you use a simulation entry. And then if you're running project accounting, you'll want to run the revenue recognition process on open projects. That's something new in version 12. And we haven't updated this yet for that function. I don't think we have any clients actually running that process. All right, so for fixed assets, you'll want to close fixed assets usually before the general ledger, but you don't have to, and we'll talk about that in a sec. So with your license for Sage X3, you do get 2,500 assets in your, 2,500 assets across all folders. So if you've got a test system and you got 2,000 assets, if you got a test system and you make a copy of your test system and you've got 2,000 assets in each folder, you'll be above the license. So you want to, the first thing you want to do is set all the fixed assets periods of 2021 to actual. We generally tend to use or leave the periods in the status of simulation until the month end when you're actually ready to generate the entries. And then at each month end, we'll change it to actual and generate the actual entry. So everything must be marked actual. You want to review the status of context for any actions you need to take. And there's usually 3 of them here, so I've listed them out. You'll want to activate any inactive assets. So if you've got an asset that's inactive, you can, generally assets that are inactive sit in the construction or the CIP or capitalized expense module first. And then when they're ready to put them into service, you convert them from a capitalized expense to a fixed asset and mark them active. So if they're not active, I think you just delete them and they go back to a status of capitalized expense. Calculation or calculate depreciation for all assets. You can run the process for all assets if you'd like, or the system will tell you specifically which assets have not had depreciation calculated yet, and you can go to that asset and just click the button on that screen locally for that asset if you've got a ton of assets that, well, actually, when you run the calculate depreciation process, it will not recalculate depreciation for assets that already had their depreciation calculated. So unless you check the box to recalculate all assets, you can just run the process once and pick up all the assets that haven't been processed yet. So you want to also confirm that all the journal entries for the month are posted. So if you've got depreciation entries or you've got, you know, disposals of assets or transfers of assets, you'll need to make sure that those are posted. The status of context will tell you which transactions you do need to post. So the status of contact is very helpful. It'll be red for the period until it'll turn green once you've confirmed that all these are done. All right, so then you can perform the close for December and 2021. And once periods are closed, they can't be reopened. And that's usually not an issue because if you do need to add an asset, you can always backdate an asset. It'll just post any depreciation entries or any type of entries to the first open GL period. So you might have some timing differences if you do backdate assets, but the entries will still post. They'll just post to a different period than when they really happened. So you can consider that. So you don't have to close the fixed assets before you close the year, but just keep in mind that it'll post any entries that do happen will post to the first open period in X3. Year-end closing, checklist continued. So you want to reconcile all your bank accounts and make sure that you record any activity in the bank account statement that has not been recorded in X3. In version 12, there's now an automatic bank reconciliation, and the system uses MT940 and BAI2 files. You should be able to get these type of files from your bank. If you can't, I know a lot of banks make available just the basic data so that you can actually do a reconciliation. So if you get check number and amount and check date, if you can get that much, we can create a template that formats itself. We have a macro that will write out a text file into like an MT940 or BAI2 format, and we can then import that. I've been testing that at one of our clients. Yeah, so we can set up a template to mimic the file layouts. Because I don't think we have any clients actually running that, we'll do a quick demo so that you can see it. So I'm in V12, and then there's a process called Bank Transaction Management. You can pretty much do, so under AP, AR accounting, bank transactions, and then advanced bank statement import, you can go to Bank Transaction Management. And you can do the process from this screen. So first thing you want to do, there's some setup involved in that we've got to set up the bank account so that it will function with the imported statement. But once you pass the setup, you can run this on a daily or however often you do reconcile your bank statement. If it's monthly, daily, whatever, it will match the transactions each time. So you start the import on the right here in the right panel. Then we pull up our settings that we've set up. And I'm grabbing a advanced bank statement import. It tells you the file statement, the file format that we're using is the BAI2. And it's reconciliation only. So that means it's just going to reconcile the bank statement. There is additional functionality too with advanced bank statement import in that it will do AR lockbox, but this one's just set up for reconciliation purposes. So we say okay to that. We grab our file. So I've set up a demo file for this. We say open. We say okay. And it's telling me the file's already been imported. I've been testing this just to make sure it tests correctly. We'll say okay. And then it says, so it's one statement with a total of 2 transactions have been successfully imported. It tells you the statement number, which is 94, and 2 transactions. Say okay to that. and then it gives you a log here. So if there were any errors, they would appear in the log. Hopefully no errors. And then you can exit out of this screen. And it was number 94. So this is just showing us new statements. If you click on new filter over here in the right panel, it'll show us the statement I just imported. So on the action button for the line, we can click on that and then select bank statement reconciliation. And it brings up the two statements here. The two transactions that we imported, those appear in red, and then everything else that went through X3 is in gray at the bottom. And it also gives us like our account balance at the top here. So if we hit proposal, and we're going to reconcile by document, it's only going to use the first 7 characters. That's as high as we can go there. And then we say OK. Then what it matches ends up in blue, and you can see that it puts a mark in here with a matching letter. So this line 1 match with line 3, and line 2 match with line 4. You can also match them manually also in the screen. So the only one that didn't match was something I did in October for more testing. So what it's matching on is the description here without the slash matches with the check number over here when they're imported. So we just got to make sure that the right information is posting to the general ledger. So it might require an auto journal change so that we get the right information posting to the general ledger so that you can match it. But once you do that, it should work. And then you can hit the save button and be done with it. So that's the automatic matching that's available in version 12 if you're on version 12. All right, so you make sure your bank statements are reconciled and your transactions in the bank have been recorded in X3. So continuing down the checklist, X3 does allow you to close the modules so that no one else can post data or transactions to the month. And you do that under setting parameter values. So in the common data closing operations, you have these 8 parameters where you can limit the postings to these modules if you don't want to close out the year yet or the month. So the ACH parameters start and end date. So in this case, if it is January 1st and you don't want people backdating purchase invoices, then you would set it to 1/1/22 to 12/31/22, and they would only be able to enter invoices, within these date ranges. So the ACH applies to purchase invoices. The CPT applies to journal entries and batch entries if you're using them. Batch entry is just a way of doing multiple journal entries at once. PRS applies to accounts receivable, accounts payable type transactions, those being customer invoices, supplier invoices, payments, entry of open item statements, entry of expense lines, and automatic payment proposals, checks, ACHs, etc. And then the one that here, VEN, is sales invoices. So you can restrict postings at the module level. You can even go one step further and restrict them at the document type level. So on your document types in X3, you can specify a valid range that document type can be used. so that people can't use that document type within the specific date range. All right, so X3 reports to support year-end general ledger balances. So before we talk about this, let's just kind of just recap. So there are also, I'm not going to save anything here. If I go out to my landing page, under view queries, there are a bunch of requesters or queries in the system that you can add to your landing pages so that you can quickly eyeball and keep on top of all the transactions that need to be posted or generated before you close out the month. So I have this one, actually it's a new tab. I have this here, you can see receipts not invoiced or not posted. You can see there's none, but you do have these queries available that you can add to a landing page in X3. Returns not posted, so these are all the items we talked about earlier. Returns not posted gives you some additional detail too. Receipt lines not invoiced. Unposted payments, unposted purchase or BP invoices, unposted sales and BP invoices, shipments not invoiced, and entries to reverse. So those can be added to any landing page. So if I go to a new tab and I hit plus, and I hit queries in say purchasing, invoices not posted, or open prepayment requests. So we just say invoice not posted. If we want to add that here, you can see it's very easy to add to a landing page. I think I kind of got ahead of myself. General ledger reports. So in version 12, all the reports that began with an NA in previous versions, version 11 and prior, do no longer exist. So Sage has mapped them to a new report here, and these might not, these reports, most of these reports, I believe, except for the first top three, I think exist in version 11 and prior. So at one point, Sage had created all these North American reports, and the rest of the world was using these over here. But all these reports work, and we're going to go through these reports. So if you're using version 12 or you're thinking about upgrading to version 12, you might want to take a look at these reports in the system and maybe even start using those reports. Sorry. All right, so the general ledger reports, I'm going to run through these real quick here. So this is the listing of reports that you can use at month end, or maybe at different times during the month, or anytime you want to print out a journal entry. And then we'll look at the inquiries that are in the system too that you should be using. So I'm just going to jump over to Excel. It was easier to present these in Excel than PowerPoint. So the first report is the Glgrp report. That's your trial balance. So this exists in all versions. And so when I ran this in our seed folder, so everything's run against the seed folder in X3. I think most clients have a seed folder. Currently, the data in that seed folder exists like in 2017, 2018. So I'm running this for 2018 to get data to show up in the report. So I give you all the parameters for the report. So you should be able to duplicate these reports if you wanted to. Or I give you all the parameter values here on the left. And we'll get this file out to you after the presentation. So this one's run in, this is your general balance. So this is your trial balance report. You can either run it in summary or detail by account. is set to yes in this case. Or you can run it by, no, I'm sorry. This one, we include all dimensions, yes or no. So in this one, we did not include the dimensions. So you can see it's just a standard trial balance, beginning balance, activity, ending balance by account. And then you can run it for all dimensions so that you can get your breakout within the account by dimension. So in your sales account, you've got some dimensions here. You got projects. You got a cost center here, CCT. I forget what the MAR is in the Pro. These are just all the default dimensions that are in the NA10 company. But it will break it out by dimension here if you do run it. All right, then you got your Glgrp, that is your account detail report. So it's going to show you the activity it ran through the account for the month. New in version 12, you have additional parameters here. So entry origin detail and partner flow detail. Partner flow is just an additional text field that exists in any journal entry. So you can filter based upon that field. And the entry origin detail is the auto journal code that actually posted the journal entry. So if you filter for that, for specific codes, you can see what auto journal posted a transaction to maybe an account that it shouldn't have, type of thing. So it's helpful for troubleshooting. So here's your, in this case, it's the bank account, and it's showing you the debit, the credit, and then the running balance here of all the transactions. I'm getting that error message just because this is embedded inside the PowerPoint or the Excel file. You got your GLANA1 report, which is account by dimension. So we're just running it for the income statement here. So if you want to see the breakout. All right. So this is showing us a subtotal for each dimension here within the account. So it might be helpful if you want to see expenses by department within the account. Yes. And then dimension by account so that you could run. So in this case, we're running it for dimension type of cost center just for this cost center. So this would be all the department's expenses for this marketing department. So $137,000 of total marketing expenses. And then you see that by account. And then you got journal entry by currency. So if you wanted to see your, so this shows you both so it shows you an invoice was entered for 520 euros and what the US dollar equivalent is. So that might be helpful. And then your journal entry detail is your piece report. And here you can see it gives you the journal entry and then the detail lines of the journal entry. You can run that from the reporting screen, or if you're on a journal entry and need to print it out, you can hit the print button on the journal entry screen. All right, so those are the reports that are out of the box for the general ledger. There's also inquiries. You got your account balance inquiry and your dimensional balance inquiry. If we go back to the Excel, parentheses at the end. So the balance inquiry, I think all clients are running this. So you put in your company or site, you pick your ledger and your date range, and it gives you, your beginning entries, your beginning balances, the entries, and then your ending balances. And you can use the action buttons to drill down by line. You can use the action button at the top of the grid to export it out to Excel and do subtotals there, or whatever you want to do. If you use the filter button and put in, say, if I put in a 4,000 here, it would filter me right down to account 4,000, so I don't have to scroll through if I've got tons of accounts here. You can also use the magnifying glass right here to look at, once you hit the magnifying glass, a text box appears and you can type in some text and it'll take you to that line, first line it finds, then the next line it finds, etc. But this is helpful. I tend to use this more than the reports. And then we got the dimensional balance inquiry. So the first thing, when you run the dimensional balance inquiry, you need to enter your criteria that you want to run it for. So in this case, we're running it for this company, for this ledger, and then we put in a budget that we want to do a comparison to, and the version of the budget that we're comparing. And then I think it lets you put in maybe up to 5 periods here that you want to compare. So in this case, I'm comparing January of 2018 through June of 2018. We're doing that as our first period, and we're comparing it to July through December of 2018. So we've got 2 periods here. And then for the columns that we want in the report, we want the balance at 6:30 and the balance at 12:31. So we're taking debits minus credits. So in this case, we link in the first period, and on line 2, we link in the second period. Then we've got the budget for period 2 as a third column. So I know this is the dimension balance inquiry, but you don't have to include dimensions in here when you run it. You can just leave off line 2 here and just pull in line 1 for the account. So we're looking at the income statement accounts, and we're looking at cost centers. And down here, usually USD will default, or whatever your default currency for that ledger is. And you do need to fill in the screen code each time, or else it gives you an error. All right, so that's your criteria. You just say OK here. It takes you to the dimensional balance inquiry, shows you what your periods are. So you get, this is your period 1, this is your period 2, and we're not using a period 3. It might be limited to 3 periods. So then you've got your accounts, your descriptions, then what your cost centers are, and then your balances. For each period, and also your budgeted amounts. You can dump that out to Excel or do whatever you want with it. So that's the dimensional balance inquiry, but you don't have to include dimensions. General ledger reports. Next slide. All right, so we'll go up to the next. So the business partner reports, there's 4 of those that are in the system. You got your BAL age group report. So that's your business partner aging. And by business partner, I mean customer and supplier. Aging reports, you run the same report whether you're running AP or AR, and you just change the control account that you're running it for, or control group that you're running it for. So the BAL age group report will tie out to month end. I should say the BAL age group report is considered a moment in time report. So if you run it, you really should date it as of today, and it should match the balance in the GL as of today. You can backdate that report, and sometimes it will match the GL on that backdated date, but it's not the report to run if you're trying to backdate, if you're trying to do a backdated report. If you want to backdate the aging report, you run the BAL age hist report, and that one has all the history, so that it can rebuild the report on that date. So that's the BAL age hist. And then you've got your GL. We'll take a look at the GL, or the business partner trial balance with matching information, and we'll look at the other one, the aging with amounts by currency. So back to Excel, and we run the Val Age Group. The Val Age Group report allows you to age either by due date or invoice date. And you have the option detail by open item, so that's either summary or detail. Excuse me. So you can run the balance. If you run it in summary, you just see the totals that are in bold. Come on. So you just see the totals that are in bold if you run it in summary. If you run it in detail, it gives you the detail. So usually it's set to 30, 60, 90. That's the one that you'd run as of right now, and that should tie out to the aging, to the general ledger as of right now. This is the backdated aging report. So you'll want to run this. The parameters for this are to run it on 121 days. You don't actually have to use these dates, but or day numbers, but you do want to go from high to low here. So 121 all the way down to 0. If these are out of order, then the report won't run. So you can set those as a default and memorize the report, or you can have your IT guy or one of us go into your system and change those defaults so that they always appear in the report, so you don't have to change them manually. Again, this one has the option to print the detail by open item, so that you can get all the detail. Otherwise, you run it in summary. And then this one ages based upon the due date. So if you need that parameter in there, we would have to add that as a small customization to the report. And then you can see the days go in the opposite order that we would actually like them in, but that's just cosmetic. And then it gives you a summary by each supplier or customer here, business partner. So that's the backdated aging. The Val Age Group Dev, the aging with currency. So if you've got multiple currencies that you're using and you want to see what those currency payables or receivables are, this is the report to run. You can also run this before you do your revaluation and try to calculate it yourself if you're trying to tie out the balances. That's the aging with currency, and then the customer trial balance. So this will show you all the activity that went through a customer account. So if the customer wants sort of a statement of their account, or one way of looking at a statement, I always call it the BP trial balance, or customer trial balance, supplier trial balance. It shows you all the invoices that went through, all the payments that went through, and then it shows you also the matching letter. So anything with an S was matched together, anything with a W was matched together, that type of thing. So it shows you what paid what, and it shows you all the account activity for that. It's really the same thing as the matching screen in X3. If you'd rather print it out, this is the report, or you can always just go to the matching screen and click on matched for that BP and dump it to Excel and look at it that way too. But that's the report. Okay, all right. So you have the stock valuation report too at month end. So that's in the stock periodic processing valuation, stock valuation report. That's not under where all the other reports are. That's in its own place. You can run it at the company level, and it will show you stock by site in summary. If you opt to include the detail, it will also show you lot, location, status, et cetera, all the other pieces of data that goes with a stock record. That report's not the cleanest report to dump out to Excel, but it does it all sit in one table in Excel. So I'm sorry, in SQL, in the database, it's in one table. So it's pretty easy to get that data out of that table and into Excel in a clean format if you ever need to do that. we can help you. So if the report needs to be backdated to the close date, then you need to run it based upon the accounting date. There's two fields in there. You can run it based upon stock date, or you can run it based upon accounting date. The report's still a little buggy, but it has been getting better, so hopefully it'll continue to get better. But we've run into some bugs still in version 12. So under Reports View Queries, there's the IMML1, and that's your fixed asset listing. It'll include the cost basis for each asset and the current year depreciation amounts. If you're working with us on fixed assets, there's a bunch of reports, or actually inquiries, that we put in the system so that you can get some better reporting on fixed assets out of the system. And then also, if you're working with us in manufacturing, generally we have a WIP query 2 that will tie out the general ledger by, or will summarize the postings to the general ledger by work order. So if there's a balance left in your WIP account at month end, you'll at least know what work orders are causing the WIP balance. Oh, all right. So I talked about this to make a dashboard out of the closing queries. Here's a list of the queries that I added to mine. Remember when I went through my landing page here? So all these are listed on this slide. If you want to add these are the ones you would add to the your landing page. You can add more. You just read the titles of each landing page. I'm sorry. Read the titles of each requester, and you can add it to the landing page if it makes sense. All right, so closing the year out, you'll want to run the process to perform final validation. So that changes all your remaining temporary 2021 entries to a status of final. Once they're final, you can't make any more changes to those journal entries. Some journal entries don't even let you make changes to them when they are temporary. Usually in that case, I'll add lines to those journal entries if I need to change those. And we had to change those for some clients. All right, so you run your final validation, get everything finalized, and then you can review the pre-closing report for blocking errors. So usually that report is generated automatically after you do the final validation, and that's the CLOPER report. It sort of lists out for you all the entries we just talked about, like invoices not posted or receipts not posted, that type of thing. Everything will be in there in that report if there are any errors left before, or any activities you need to perform before you can close out the period. So to close the period, you actually go to Common Data to do that. In that screen, it allows you to close the stock period so that no more stock transactions can post. And you might do that, maybe the day after the stock period is completed, or after month end. And then you'll want to perform the period close. So when you close out December, it'll prompt you to close out 2021. You just need to make sure that 2022 is open, so that when X3 closes the year out, it's creating two journal entries. It's doing one on 12/31 to move the balances from the income statement into the retained earnings account, and it's also creating the beginning balances on January 1st for the balance sheet. So to actually close the year, you want to have all users log out of X3. You want to shut down your accounting tasks. Generally, the new period is the journal entry and document type used to create the closing entries. If you implemented X3 before in a previous version, sometimes it might just be new. Sometimes you might be using CLO entries too. But generally, if moving forward, versions 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11 and 12, it's the new period entry you'll be using. You want to confirm the miscellaneous accounts on the chart of accounts. So what happens if you go to close the year out, it might tell you you're missing one of these accounts. So you just need to fill them in because they're not always used in the closing process, but you might get an error that just says it's blank. So you just need to fill it in. So you get an error that says, line 12 is it, or no account line 12 type of error, and we'll need to fill that in. Line 11 of the chart of accounts should be your retained earnings account. That's where it's going to close out your current earnings. And will show up next year. We just kind of talked about this. The journal entries that get created, you get an entry closing the P&L accounts to the retained earnings account. You also get an entry establishing open balances for balance sheet accounts. If you're not ready to close the year out, X3 has a process or a utility that's called year-end simulation, and that just rolls the balances forward without closing the year, without creating any journal entry. But if you need to do reporting in January, you might want to see what those balances are so that you're not just getting January activity. You want the balance sheet accounts to include a beginning balance that matches last year. Years can be reopened to any audit adjustments. So if you do close the year and then need to fix something, we can reopen that year. And then down below is the actual screen. So you'll pick your company. I just set all your ledgers to no here. So all ledgers, it defaults to yes, but you just change it to no. You usually got to do this one at a time. In this case, we're closing the legal ledger. It tells you what the new year is going to be and what the documents are going to be. Normally, you just got to fill these in as new periods. If you're again, if you started using X3 in a previous version, you might have to fill in the closing documents and closing journal too as CLO. So it'll give you a log also, and it'll give you a log if there's any errors that why you can't close out the year.
Thanks.
So financial reporting.
So far, no questions. If anybody has questions, just a reminder, there's a Q&A tool at the bottom as well as the chat.
All right, so generally most clients are using SEI to do their reporting, but X3 also has the financial data extractor in the system. I'm just showing you an example of one here. So in this case, out of the box, there's a US balance sheet. So what you can do is you map all your accounts, or you assign the cash code to all the cash accounts in your chart of accounts and write down the list. You got a receivables code, prepaid, inventory. If you assign all those out, you'll get a balance sheet that will show up. There's also an income statement account, income statement report too. I know we do have some clients using the financial data extractor. So it's pretty good for some basic reports. SEI has a lot more power to it, but and then also after you close out the year end, you want to confirm that the balances at 12/31 year ending match the 1/1 balances for 2022. So I have seen it over the years where the balances don't roll forward correctly. So sometimes you got to reopen the period and year and close them again so that you can get those balances to roll forward correctly. I'm not sure why that happens, but it does happen. Other considerations, budgets. So new budget codes can be created, or 2022 balances can be imported to the existing budget codes that you have in your system, because there'll be no data in the 2022 fields. So you can just continue using the same budget code, or you can create new ones. That way you won't have to update SEI or other reports to new budget codes. You can just report on the existing budget codes. I don't think we have any clients using operational budgets anymore, but if you are using operational budgets, you'll need to do the carryover. So if there's anything left in those budgets, it can be carried forward into 2022, so you can continue creating purchase orders against those capital budgets. And then you'll want to set your new standard costs. Some clients do this before year end and then have a process run at year end to update those costs on January 1st. Other clients just wait until January and establish new standards once they get through the year. If you're working with us, generally we use the same process to create new standard costs. So the system will continue using the existing standard cost until the 2022 standard is created. So you don't have to create new standards if the 2021 standards are good. You'll copy the current raw material standard cost to simulated costs. Or you can run the process in X3 to copy all the latest purchase costs of raw materials to the simulated costs. You could also dump an spreadsheet out to Excel, change the cost in Excel and import it back in. So as new raw material simulated costs. So there's different processes you can use to update the raw material costs for 2022. And then once you've updated all your raw material costs and you've got your new overhead allocation rates going and any fixed cost changes, that type of thing, you can do a BOM cost roll-up for 2022, and it will roll up to a new finished good cost based upon the simulated cost of the raw materials. And usually what I tell clients to do then is run the valuation report using the current standard cost, and then run the valuation report using the new simulated cost. And that's going to give you an idea of what's going to change or what the posting is going to be in the general ledger for the change in the standard cost. And if you're good with that, you can copy all the simulated costs to standard costs for 2022, using the copy out, the copy C out function above. So we do work with some clients on that, helping them get through the new standard cost process. 1099s. So there's 3 steps here in calculating or printing out your 1099s. You'll want to calculate the 1099 payment, so that just generates a listing of all the amounts that were paid to suppliers over the last year, calendar year. And then step 2, amounts subject to reporting can be edited using the 1099 payment summary. So that's down here. So you calculate your 1099 payments. That creates payments that you can then edit at the invoice level, so that you can look at each invoice and see how much of that invoice should be or is subject to 1099. And then once you edit that, if everything's good to go, You can use the 1099 generation process to print out the 1099 and also print out the 1096. For those of you that just started using X3 this year, there's an import, or you can manually enter the 1099 beginning balances, or you can use that to do an adjustment. Forms need to be purchased, so you need to purchase your 1099 forms and your 1096 forms. Electronic filing is not yet supported, but we could build you a file if you wanted to file electronically. And then usually sometime in January, the Sage provides a patch so that anything that changes with regards to 1099s
Hey, Ed,
can be updated.
I'm gonna,
Yes.
I just looked and it looks like yesterday they released the 1099 updates. So it's hot off the press here. So we'll probably, Walt, I don't know if we're gonna send out information probably on our blog but I just checked and it's on the Sage knowledge base.
Perfect.
Oh.
We'll make sure that we include that in our
Yeah,
year-end communication. Thanks, Leanne.
you're welcome.
So that's 1099s. And then the last thing here is you want to update your default date parameters in the system. So these dates default to the criteria screens of reports and inquiries. And the main one here is lines 2 and 3, default start date and default end date. So you want to update those to 1/1/22 and 12/31/22. The statistical end dates, I think those get used with the queries. So you can update those also. I don't think you have to worry about anything else here. So it's really lines 2 and 3. And you can set those at the folder, company, or user level. So this allows you to set, like, under general parameters, we'll set up general parameters, parameter values. You can set them for the whole folder, legislation, company site. If you need to set them at the user level, you need to go to the user and set it at under maintain users. All right, so your X3 customer account managers, Gia Lane on the East Coast and Mike Scherer on the West Coast. If you need to get in contact with them, there are your numbers and email addresses. And the last piece here is you can also ask a question to support at rklsolutions.com.
Great.